The Temple of the Heart, when Christ rebuilt what was broken. A gospel reflection on the feast of the dedication of the Lateran Basilica. It's strange how quiet a church can feel when it's empty. The echoes of prayer fade, candles flicker out, and all that's left is silence. But sometimes, that's when God begins his most powerful rebuilding work. Because the story of this Sunday's gospel, the cleansing of the temple, isn't just about walls and altars. It's about the temple that is your soul, and the Jesus who refuses to let it stay defiled. The Gospel, John chapter 2, 13-22. Jesus found in the temple those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple, and he said, "Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." But he was speaking about the temple of his body. Imagine that scene. The temple, meant to be a place of prayer, had become loud with animals, coins, bargaining voices. The smell of business, not holiness. Then Jesus walks in. And for the first time in the Gospels, we see him furious. Not at sinners, not at prostitutes or tax collectors, but at those who had turned God's house into a market. With burning eyes, he weaves a whip of cords. He flips tables, scatters coins, drives out animals. And in the chaos, his voice rises above the noise. "Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." You can almost hear his heart breaking. This was supposed to be a place of love. Now it had become a business transaction. But Jesus wasn't just angry. He was grieving. He wasn't just cleaning stone floors. He was cleansing hearts. Because the temple he truly came to restore wasn't built by human hands. It was the living temple of every soul, yours, mine, the church, his body. When Jesus said, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days," he was speaking about himself, but also about us. You see, every human heart is a temple, built for prayer, meant to hold the presence of God. But like Jerusalem's temple, our hearts can easily become crowded, with noise, with worry, with distractions and greed. We fill them with the marketplace of the world, comparison, resentment, ambition, fear. And slowly, the sacred space becomes cluttered. Prayer turns into performance. Faith turns into routine. Until one day, Jesus walks in, quietly, firmly, and begins to overturn the tables. He takes away what doesn't belong. He shakes the foundations of our comfort, not to destroy us, but to rebuild us. Years ago, in a small town in Italy, an earthquake destroyed a beloved cathedral. The roof caved in, the altar was shattered, and the ancient statue of Christ was found in pieces. The townspeople mourned. They wanted to throw the fragments away and start over, but an old sculptor said, "No, let me try something." He gathered the broken marble, every cracked and splintered piece. For months, he worked, carefully, quietly, patiently. When he finally revealed his work, the town gasped. The statue of Christ stood again. But now, every scar and fracture had been turned into gold lines, filled with light that shimmered when the sun rose through the stained glass. The brokenness had not been hidden, it had been redeemed. That's what Christ does when he rebuilds the temple of your heart. He doesn't erase the past, he transforms it. Sometimes we fear when God begins to overturn our tables, when he removes what we cling to, a habit, a sin, a false comfort. It hurts. But cleansing is not rejection. It's love in motion. Just like in the temple, Jesus doesn't rage to destroy. He purifies to renew. He wants to make space again for grace. He wants your heart to breathe, to be free. Every table he overturns is an invitation. Let me make this place holy again. Today, the church celebrates the dedication of the Lateran Basilica, the oldest church in Rome, the mother of all churches. But we don't celebrate the building itself. We celebrate what it represents, the dwelling place of God among his people. That feast reminds us that holiness doesn't depend on architecture. The real temple God loves to dwell in is the soul that welcomes him. That's why Christ's cleansing of the temple isn't just an ancient memory, it's a daily mission. Every morning, every confession, every Mass, he rebuilds his church, beginning inside us. When Jesus rose from the dead, the disciples remembered his words. Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days. The temple they thought he meant, the grand stone sanctuary, was gone decades later. But the true temple, his body, the church, the hearts of believers, still stands. Because love cannot be destroyed. Grace cannot be buried. When Christ rebuilds something, it stays eternal. Maybe your life right now feels like that temple, cracked, cluttered, maybe even abandoned. Maybe the joy you once had in prayer has faded. Maybe the altar of your heart feels silent and cold. But take heart, Christ is not afraid of your ruins. He walks into your temple today, not to condemn, but to restore. Let him overturn the tables. Let him sweep out what doesn't belong. Let him build again what time and sin have broken. Because the same Lord who rebuilt the temple of his body in 3 days can rebuild yours too, with patience, with mercy, with love that never ends. The Church of St. John Lateran has stood for nearly 1,700 years. It has survived fire, war, earthquakes, even neglect. And yet every time it was rebuilt, it stood stronger. Not because of its stones, but because of the hearts that believed within it. So tonight, as you listen to this story, close your eyes and see your own heart as a cathedral. Let Christ walk in. Let his voice echo again. This is my Father's house, and it will be a house of prayer. Then let the silence that follows be the sound of him rebuilding, brick by brick, wound by wound, until your heart becomes once more the temple of the living God.